Welcome to the Make Heaven Crowded podcast, a space where we dive deeper into Sunday's message and talk about how we can live out our faith in a world that's constantly changing. We'll unpack real-life topics, world events, and what it means to follow Jesus in everyday life. For more info or to get connected, go to teamfbc.info. Let's make heaven crowded.
Well, yesterday we kicked off our parable sermon series. Roger, you kicked it off using the parable of the Good Samaritan. Why, out of all the parables you could have chose, why did you choose that one?
Well, not to start political from the very beginning. Since September, obviously September 10th, I always say a good preacher, a good message that a preacher preaches is one that he's preaching to himself. And so anytime I think of what I want to preach about, I always ask the question, what do I need to hear if I'm sitting in the congregation? And I think never before in my adult lifetime have I seen walls get built up on what a neighbor is. And we put, an asterisk. Well, a neighbor is the person that, we have to have these prerequisites before I consider you my neighbor. And so you have to at least vote for this bare minimum. You have to at least have this in common with me, and then I will be willing to give you this neighbor title. And when you read the parable of the Good Samaritan, the tension that Jesus was facing is that they were all defining neighbor completely different. They said, oh, we love our neighbor that looks like us, that votes like us, that lives in the same, geographical location. And Jesus says, no, your neighbor is the world. And so for me, since September 10th of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, we have never been more divided, and it's never easier for me to say, no, I am going to keep my neighbors in this little bitty vacuum of who I am and what I believe, but to really convict myself and say, no, I got to find a way to love those that are the most unlovable. And so to me, that sets up the tension beautifully of the Good Samaritan of, hey, A, who is our neighbor? Spoiler alert, everyone.
Yeah.
And then B, how do I love my neighbor even when all I want to do is hate my neighbor? And I think that's the tension of really what created that message.
Yeah, so the heartbeat kind of behind this podcast that we are doing is to go deeper into the passage we talked about on Sunday, and then maybe talk about some hot button topics that are going on throughout the world right now. And so we're talking about what took place in our message on Sunday. You preached on the Good Samaritan from Luke 10.
Yep.
And we're talking through parables. Jordan, as we're talking through parables, why did Jesus use parables in the first place? Like, what were the whole purpose?
Well, there's some people that think he used them to speak in code,
Yeah.
where only people that were connected, had eyes to see and ears to hear, would understand what he was saying. But it's also just as we've talked about, like we did with our movie series, that you can take a present day or a story of some kind and apply a biblical approach to it. So it is kind of fascinating how it can be used for multiple things, because I know when I used to read the parables, I would just be like, I have no idea what that means. But then it's like, wait a minute, do I have eyes to see and ears to hear? Uh-oh. But I was curious, and I went to go find out. Okay, I want to know what this means.
Yeah.
And so I dug, and then you learn it, and you're like, oh, okay, I get that. That makes perfect sense. But yeah, it's just a way to, because even some people think that because a lot of times he's speaking in front of the Pharisees.
Yeah.
That he's able to talk about them without them knowing he's talking about them. There's a lot of people, yeah. But yet the other people he's speaking to are like, they're right there. And you're but it was like shooting right over their head. They had no idea. So I don't know. I kind of like to take that approach as to what he was using it for, but obviously it's real world situation that he's able to apply. So.
Yeah, you hit on it, and you did a good job explaining it yesterday. If you people listening have not watched yesterday's message, they need to go back and listen to it, because you explained how when the disciples asked Jesus why he talked in parables, it happened in Matthew chapter 13. He's in the middle of the parable of the sower, and he takes a break from the parable to actually explain, this is why I speak in parables. And in there he even gets where he says, to reveal the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. And so taking these kingdom principles, things about the kingdom of God, who God is, and what it looks like to follow him, and putting it in everyday stories and terms. And, part of that is having good soil and being able to receive it. And if our soil is not good, we're not going to understand these stories. But to understand the context of the Good Samaritan, the book of Luke is all about explaining the gospel and how Jesus came for everybody. And he came to reach the whole world, not just part of the world, not just Jews, but the whole world. And the specific context in Luke chapter 10 that's leading up to the story of the Good Samaritan is he just sent out the 72 and celebrating them because they are seeing many people come to know Jesus, and so he's celebrating that. But what we also learned in Acts or Luke 9, leading up to this point, is he's making his final trip to Jerusalem already here in the story of Luke. So this kingdom of him going after the whole world, it's all kind of ramping up, all leading to this time that he's in front of the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, and he shares this story about the Good Samaritan. So you shared a little bit about why you chose this one over all of them. And I love this as an opportunity to go a little bit deeper than we were able to on Sunday. So what were some things about this parable that you weren't able to touch on?
Yeah, well, I touched on it, but I think just to really reiterate the significance of why this was so important is because, how much they despised the Samaritans. And he was speaking to a Jewish audience, and that presumes that any mentioning of Samaritan, I mean, the word Samaritan would be like terrorist. If I'm telling you a story and I said, there was once a guy, blah, 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 and then a terrorist showed up, you would be like, oh, good, somebody's about to get killed or something terrible is going to happen.
And that's the bad guy.
Yes. And then it's not only controversial enough to make the Samaritan the hero of the story. That's scandalous because everything Jesus did was scandalous. And that's why I love like what he did. But then to take the priest, right, and the Levite, and we don't know, okay, what's the tribe of Levi? These were considered the most prestigiously religious people. I mean, they were at the top of the temple when it came to all of this stuff, and that they're already filling in the blanks of how this story goes, which is the big bad Samaritan is the one that finishes the job on the guy that gets robbed, and the priest swoops in because the priest is a godly man who has religion, and the priest is the good guy and the Samaritan's the bad guy. Jesus, I think, purposely sometimes was controversial because he wanted them to think of saying, no, actually, the neighbor that you never look at, the neighbor that you would never in a million years stop for, he's actually the one in the story that represents the neighbor, and the religious priest that you all look up to and you go to for biblical wisdom, he's the one that walks by. And I think that was just so upside down of everything that they had learned in religion. And to me, it goes back to it's almost a cliche of, oh, it's not a religion, it's a relationship. And sometimes, you roll your eyes of like, okay, but really for Jesus, showing that this religion that they had in their mind and this religion that they had been brought up in was the same religion that led the priest and the Levite to keep walking. And yet for the Samaritan to stop and say, hey, I have pity for you. And so I think as controversial as that was for Jesus to say, sometimes we lose the controversy of what Jesus did and we take it for granted. But to really think the discomfort that Jesus created in this story, and just as he made discomfort possible for them, we need to let that be uncomfortable for us to take us out of our comfort zone.
So what was it that the Samaritans had done that the Jews thought they were just so detestable and it would have turned the whole narrative upside down?
They considered them half-breeds.
Yeah.
I mean, and
what that means, though, half-breed means that they were fully Jewish people at one time until things like the exile happened when the Babylonians or the Syrians or the Greeks or the Romans had taken over, and those certain Jewish people started to take on the customs and marry into those other cultures. And so the purists of the Jews, they did not like that.
And when you go to John chapter 4, when Jesus is at the well with the woman, yes, she's a woman, which already made her ostracized enough. Yeah. But even before she mentioned she's a woman, she says, why are you speaking to me? I'm a Samaritan, because it wasn't enough for them to be at the well at the same time. For a Jew to even speak to a Samaritan was considered extremely controversial. And then, of course, what does Jesus do? He has the longest conversation in the entire New Testament with this Samaritan woman.
He kicks off his ministry.
Exactly. And to the point where the disciples show back up to the well and they're like, whoa,
what are you doing?
What is he doing? You're talking to a Samaritan. It was that level of vitriol, that level of viciousness, which is why in my sermon, I'm like, what example can I think of? I'm going to go with Bloods and Crips, because it's like that level of disdain of like, I'm going to kill you level. That's kind of how Jews viewed Samaritans in that culture.
Well, I'd even say it even extended into the apostles or the disciples in Acts when Philip goes and reaches the Samaritans. He has to call in Peter and John for them to double check that they truly...
Exactly. Are you sure? Before this ink dries, do we need to make sure?
Yeah.
And so again, we read that and we think of it as just a story and all that, but like as if we
because we only know Samaritan as a good person.
Exactly.
That's just normal vernacular. Oh, you're a good Samaritan.
And non-Christians will even, we say, oh yeah, I read on the news there's this good Samaritan.
Yeah.
And we take for granted of really how controversial this story is. And so for me, I wanted to create that tension because right now, again, in my lifetime, I'm only 32, but in my adult lifetime, I've never found it more difficult really to not build up those walls with everything that has happened and to define our neighbor as, oh, well, those are just my people.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I even think it's funny the last verse where Jesus says, "So who is it that did the right thing?" And the lawyer can only say the one that showed grace.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even say
Yeah.
the name Samaritan.
because I imagine in that crowd of Jews, they're like, come on, lawyer, don't tell him the Samaritan. Like,
Yeah.
let it be the priest,
Yeah.
let it be the Levite, because
the one that
obvious
showed
answer,
grace. Well, which one is that?
yeah, the obvious answer is sometimes the hardest answer, and
Yeah.
that's true for us too, right? And so,
Well, I think Jesus did a good job. Obviously, it's Jesus, but you did a good job of pulling it out in your sermon. Of he switched the question. He
Mhm.
moved it from when he originally asked it, well, who is my neighbor? Jesus turned it into, well, who can you be a neighbor to?
Yeah.
Like he put the action back on them as listening, and he never came out and explicitly said who the neighbor was.
Yeah.
But he basically flipped their question of like, who is my neighbor to? Who can you be a neighbor
so
to?
let me ask you a question. Both of you, either one can answer, because this kind of goes into what we're talking about of how sometimes we feel hated, we feel ostracized by not just individuals but companies and organizations and stuff like that. How do I be a neighbor to somebody who hates me? How do I be a neighbor to someone who couldn't care less if I'm dead or alive? That's a really good question, because that's kind of where I struggle with, where my pushback to Jesus is like, well, Jesus, I'm supposed to love my neighbors, but what if my neighbors hate my guts? Then how do we love our neighbor? And I think that's a good question to ponder as Christians.
Yeah. Jordan.
Well, you still show kindness, and what does that do in turn? The people that truly hate you, it's like heaping coals on their head.
Yeah.
But you're still expected to do kind and be kind and act kind. You don't change a thing.
Yeah.
And I would say the harder part is when it's not that we hate somebody so much they wish they were dead, but people we just do not agree with on a lifestyle, biblical, anything like that. If they were our neighbor, we're just not going to talk to them. It's probably our first response, which again, that's not a right response either.
But where the world warps this is to say, okay, good, you're supposed to love your neighbor. My neighbor is in this lifestyle. My neighbor believes in this. And
Yeah,
so therefore,
matches what I
love
yeah.
is tolerance. Tolerance is love. And so now we've completely warped this view of what biblical love is. And that's where I don't want people to hear this and say, oh, well,
You have to accept.
The pastor said I'm supposed to love my neighbor, and so therefore I'm just going to tolerate everything that
Yeah.
they're doing that's destructive to them or destructive to me. No, sometimes the most loving thing you could do is stand up and say, hey, what you are doing is either hurting yourself or hurting other people. And so please don't hear this as some like hippie call to pacifism.
This is
Yeah.
because this is actually a good segue into the conversation we're about to have about should you watch the Super Bowl halftime
Yeah.
show or not. And so,
But you can pray for, hey, Lord, how can I speak truth into this neighbor that hopefully they will have ears to hear and an open heart to listen.
Because
And
the world, let me just finish on this last, because the world will say, Jordan, you're my best friend. Let's say you're addicted to heroin. For me to love you means that I have to tolerate your use of heroin.
No.
When actual biblical love is going to say, I have to do everything possible to get you away from that, because there is a life better for you on the other side.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and that's how I would respond. Like your question, 100% truth, 100% grace.
Yeah.
Like Jesus wasn't 50% truth, 50% grace. He was 100% both. And I think if Christians were going to be a good friend, a good neighbor, we don't have to agree with people 100%.
Mhm.
But we can give them 100% truth, and we can give them 100% grace. And that's what I think the definition of love is truth and grace.
Because there's
meeting
tough
at
love
that
too.
time. Absolutely.
Because Jesus did a lot of things. Conform was very
Not
rarely
one.
one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
I don't think that ever happened.
Never.
And which again is probably a big pushback to Christianity nowadays is we've become so complacent that intolerant of certain things instead of drawing our line in the sand.
It's just blurry.
Yeah, but we can definitely do better. We need to do better.
Yeah.
But it comes from, hey, we can have grace, but we can also stand on truth. And so how can we love our neighbor? I think you mentioned a few. It's hard to hate somebody when you're praying for somebody.
Yeah.
Like if you're constantly praying for somebody, I think the Lord does a work in your heart as He's doing a work on them, and you're going to be more attentive to how you can represent that love whenever you are around them, for sure. The second thing I think is being consistent, like being consistent in what you believe, but also in how you act towards them in everything that you do. So praying for them, being consistent, I think are two big components of being able to do life with somebody that you may disagree with.
Which, as you said, segues well into the modern era of what we're talking about.
But before we get there, I have one more question from the Good Samaritan story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, in a way, Jesus was telling the story of himself, like Jesus being the Samaritan? Like he was placing
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
the Samaritan
Well, and I
represented
think
Jesus.
that's where Jesus was smarter than everyone in the room, because I think every parable that Jesus gave, there is some level of where is Jesus in this picture, and ultimately the grand story of the gospel, where it all goes back to the cross. And so I think Jesus is always prophesying, even in that, and they didn't see it at the time, which is why he said, hey, some of this you're not going to get right now. Some of it, later on, you will understand what I'm telling you. But I think the ultimate Samaritan was, in terms of the grand Samaritan of the story, it really does replicate the ministry of Christ, that he came to be a Samaritan to us. He came and rescued us, just like in the story, the Samaritan rescues the stranger. The stranger did nothing to earn it. He didn't deserve it. And yet what did the Samaritan do? He
Outpouring of
he
love.
took the burdens of the stranger and put them on his shoulders. Well, what's the ministry of Christ? It's taking our sin and carrying it on his shoulders. It's the same concept.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's just so many things more whenever you go down the story and you read it with that lens, like Jesus being the Samaritan.
Despised.
He redefines holiness, as you said, like he didn't see them for who they were, but gave them active mercy and grace.
The blank check, giving it to the innkeeper, saying, hey, I don't care how much it is, just like our sin. Yeah, you think you've sinned too much, guess what? This check is blank. It doesn't have an end goal on it.
And then what did he say right after he gave him a blank check? Said, when I come back. Is that preluding the second
the
coming?
return of Christ?
Yeah. So I do think he was, kind of revealing maybe that in the kingdom. That, and Jesus didn't come in a way that all the religious leaders thought their Messiah was going to come. And they definitely would not expect him to come as a Samaritan in the story. So
the suffering servant or the suffering Messiah was not in their bingo card.
And I love that the smartest guy in the room, according to their culture, which would have been the lawyer, was actually kind of the dumbest guy in the room, and that he wasn't seeing the most obvious truths, where Jesus
should have known better.
Parables are what you would give to children 2,000 years ago. I mean, that's what you would tell a child, a parable, for them to understand. He's giving oftentimes childlike illustrations, and yet the most religious, the most wise, the most educated are the ones that are scratching their heads.
Yeah. Well, that does give a good segue into kind of like, so in this podcast, we want to talk about a little deeper dive into our sermon from Sunday, but then talk about what's going on in the world and how we can apply biblical and our Christian values and Christian worldview into that. And so this past week, we found out who the Super Bowl halftime performer was going to be. And so let's talk about that a little bit, because Facebook is going crazy over who's performing at Super Bowl halftime. Jordan, did you have any idea who Bad Bunny was?
No clue.
Before this week.
I was just like, who's that?
No idea. That eliminates my question of what is your favorite Bad Bunny song?
Couldn't. Mm-hmm.
What about you, Roger? Did you know who Bad Bunny was before?
I found out who he was during the Monday Night Football game, Googled who he was, and read his Wikipedia page. That was my introduction to this Bad Bunny.
That was enough?
I found out a lot of things about him, such as his fluid sexuality, his view on...
What does that even mean?
I learned about this reading his Wikipedia page, as many of your children are reading, probably finding
they
out
may already know
sexual fluidity is, or at least getting a clarification, where he says, literally the quote on Wikipedia is, I'm attracted to women now, but who's to say tomorrow I might be attracted to men? Like that's go read the quote on his Wikipedia page, or don't. I also found out his views on many things that are kind of antithetical to Christianity, but having never listened to his actual music, I don't know anything about him, but I think I could definitively say we're probably not going to hear any Chris Tomlin cover songs during the halftime show. So,
well, that's kind of like been a common theme for the halftime show. When was the last time you watched?
I went back.
When's the last time you watched a full halftime show?
Well, I think halftime shows are stupid. Period. It has nothing to do with who's performing. The last halftime show I remember watching and enjoying, and of course, Bruce Springsteen's probably my favorite music artist of all time. Was the Bruce Springsteen halftime show, and I want to say I was either in high school or I graduated. That was a decade ago. Apparently, last year Kendrick Lamar was all about Serena Williams. There was some drama there with Drake. Again, I don't care, but it was big
so
news.
funny. I'm watching. I'm like, why is Serena Williams?
And
no
then
idea.
A few years before that, Jennifer Lopez, who basically had a striptease on screen for 15 minutes, literally. I mean, she had a stripper pole. And then we go back to 2003, 2004, and Janet Jackson. So
and Justin,
and Justin Timberlake. I'll have you naked at the end of this song, and they weren't kidding.
What happened to just get old somebody like George Strait?
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
You don't
That'd
think?
be
Because I
awesome.
think that represents too many Americans.
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Because that's where why one of my only one I can think of is Tom Petty when he was,
Yeah.
and I don't even know what year that was, but
Yeah.
and the only reason why I say that is because I heard the fans or the crowd singing louder than him because they knew his songs.
Yeah.
And they could sing along.
It's a song that you knew.
And I knew it.
An
Yeah.
everyday American person
Yeah.
working a 9 to 5 is like, hey, I know this song.
Yeah.
Most Americans, I think if you took a regular working class American and you asked them what their favorite Bad Bunny song was, they're going to have no idea what you're talking about. But that's just the culture that we
It's
live
like,
in.
was it Chris Stapleton when he did the national anthem? It was just like,
It's the most beautiful thing in the
whoa,
world.
man, that was amazing.
So it begs the question, just overall, as Christian parents, should you allow your kids or should you watch the Super Bowl halftime?
we changed the channel. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't think I think obviously a parent needs to make their own parental decisions. I also think a lot of times kids are not watching the Super Bowl with their parents. They're I remember growing up, like even though I wasn't a Christian, like my church friends would invite me, like we would have a youth group night for Super Bowl, and then it's like imagining churches coming together and watching this, and this is what they're showing. I think parents, I would hope, would have some level of conviction of, yeah, I don't know if I want my kid watching Jennifer Lopez strip for 15 minutes. Like, I don't think that's a useful amount of time, to
Yeah.
put towards my child. But I think the question is
Because that now has become, if that's allowed, it was always my understanding, if it's allowed on TV, it should be okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to watch it because that should be G or PG. Well, then you're watching that and you're like, no, that is not okay. And
Yeah.
if there will be kids watching it, and then if they thought like I did as a kid, well, it's okay because it's just on regular TV. They're thinking that's now okay to do those things.
Well,
and
and I
act like
think
that.
I did something, taking it to the broad culture. I did something this past week that I've always been a hypocrite about, which is big company comes out, does something anti-Christian, says something anti-Christian. I get angry, and then I go and I buy their product because, of course, I do, because it's convenient. Well, this past week, I finally fed up. I canceled my Netflix subscription.
There we
I've
go.
had it since 2014, 2015. Had it for over 10 years. I finally said, listen, this company hates me. They've spit in my face too many times. My convenience of sitting on the couch and getting some remedial enjoyment out of this, yeah, it's not worth it.
What'd
I'm
they
not
do
giving
to-
money to people that hate me anymore.
What'd they do to finally make you delete Netflix?
Well, they've done a lot of things, but the way that everything, all of these shows that they're creating are completely opposed to family values, completely opposed to the things that we as Christians hold dear, which is the nuclear family, which is the best way for a family is to have a mother and a father in the household, and they don't agree with that. In fact, they actively preach against that through
Yeah.
the shows that they make and the shows that they produce. And so it's like, why give them a monthly payment
Yeah.
to hate me? I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that anymore.
So, well,
True.
for those that don't know, Netflix for a while now, not just this past week.
This is not
but
an overnight,
They've
yeah.
had kids cartoons and shows that has LGBT propaganda. They have homosexual couples. They have transgender stuff going on in these little cartoon shows. Well, people started posting these on X about revealing some of those. Well, Elon Musk actually caught hint of it, made a big post about it. Over the past week, Netflix stock has went down like $50 million.
That's crazy.
People like you saying, hey, we're going to take a stand. We're not going to invest our money into this company anymore. People like me who still bummed their Netflix off their mom and dad. And like, which was very aggravating over the past couple of years because they started cracking
They
down on
cracked
that.
down on that, yeah.
Yeah, and so every 14 days I'd have to call my dad and be like, hey, I need the code for Netflix again. But anyway, I deleted it off of my stuff, so now I'm not wasting my time.
How
on it.
worse? And my question myself, like Roger, in the next month, how worse is my life going to look like now that I don't have Netflix?
Probably
And the
gonna be
answer
better.
is it's going to have no negative repercussions
Yeah.
whatsoever.
But I think it goes over to the Super Bowl halftime because it's
Yep.
this. Like, parents, as they are parenting their kids, I heard it put this way, it's like fresh poured cement. Like, you have that poured, and the impressions are constantly being made. And, like, you have the opportunity in those 18 years of life while they're living with you to help form what that cement's going to look like and what impressions are going to be on it and everything like that. And so although you can't protect them from everything, you're going to do everything you can to protect what is going to have the impressions on their life. And so whether it's watching
It's initials or handprints.
yeah, and whatever TV shows they're watching, whether it be Netflix or Super Bowl halftime, all of those are making certain impressions
Yeah, absolutely.
that are being cemented in. And so while you have the control over that, I think you do have to guard that as much as possible. Now, like I was a kid watching Super Bowl, I was never sitting down and watching the halftime. We were outside playing like some sort of, that was our time to go out and play. We'd play basketball, football, whatever, or get food. I don't remember watching a halftime show up until recently.
Yeah.
When did they
Um,
start having halftime shows on
I
with
looked
Super
at they've
Bowl?
had them indefinitely, just
Yeah.
forever. But what I think is interesting on that is when we talk about halftime shows and stuff like this, I think that too often do Christians say, well, that's just the way the world is. And we were just talking about statistics. 3/4 of our nation, one study said 67, another one says as high as 78%
Yeah.
of Americans identify as Christian. And yet there's not that representation that we're seeing anywhere.
Mm.
And so the response is, well, yeah, there's grotesque things in our world that are being shoved down our throats, but you know what? That's just the way the world is, and that we just need to settle with that. And I think we're getting to a point in our country, I pray, that Christians are finally saying, you know what? No, I don't have to just sit and say that's the way the
Yeah.
world. That we actually have the ability to turn the television off.
I don't
And
have to-
unfortunately, in our world, Christians, we don't do that. We keep the TV on and then we complain about what's on the TV, but we don't turn the TV
Yeah,
off.
we kept taking what we were getting force fed.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're still supporting it with your time and like
Yeah.
your energy. Now, does that mean, going back to the Good Samaritan, do you have to call out and judge and tear down everybody that does watch Bad Bunny in the Super Bowl halftime? No. But what you can do, and I hope they do it. I saw a thing, Corey Osbury and Forrest Frank are trying to collab together to put on their own Super Bowl halftime. So
Yeah.
to give Christian families, an alternative, that is what I love. That's what I'm talking about. Instead of like going and bashing people for what they are doing,
Mhm.
us starting something that is something family friendly that we are able to tune into that's during that same
Yeah.
time of the half.
But I would
time
have
show.
clarified something you just said there, because it's often said, well, as Christians, we're not supposed to judge, and we use this judgment term as just some blanketed term. We all judge every single day. Matthew 7:1, Jesus says, do not judge lest ye be judged. But then in John chapter 7, he says, when you judge, judge with a righteous judgment. So he doesn't tell us to never judge. He actually tells us how to judge, which that there is such a thing as a righteous judgment. If you are putting something in my face that goes against everything I know to be near and dear and true, it is not an unrighteous judgment for me to say, hey, what you are doing is unbiblical, and I'm not going to have any part to do
But that is true. The judgment I was talking about is tearing him down. And
Yeah, sinful
Mm.
judgment.
Okay, yeah,
I
that's
agree.
what
And
I'm
that's
talking
where
about.
Jesus distinguishes self-righteous
Yeah.
judgment
Yeah.
versus righteous judgment. And so we are to righteously judge in those situations, especially when we're dealing with children. Because what does Jesus say about children? You'd be better off to tie a millstone around your neck and throw yourself in a lake than to harm these little ones. And so
Yeah.
that's where we have a responsibility.
And I would say these imprints are harming. But I also say, I guess to shut the TV off is a silent judgment. And in my heart, I'm hoping that when they go back to see the ratings, that they'll see, wow, there was this massive dip.
We had a blackout.
Yeah, in
Bad
viewership.
Bunny was a bad decision.
Yes.
Yeah. And I wonder if they'll ever catch on to that, though. I don't know.
Money talks.
Yeah,
It does.
I always love it when Pride Month starts and all these big companies and they release, their generic, we have this is our support and Pride. But notice this past year there was less of that, and it's because
Yeah.
they will always follow the money. And so yes, they're silent protesting, but all they care about is dead presidents.
Yeah.
And so if we as Christians
On
can
pieces
speak,
of paper.
yeah, we can speak with our wallets.
Yeah.
That is ultimately what
Yeah.
we need to do.
And so I don't know. Has Bud Light recovered?
That's a good question.
I just don't know.
It's a
I'm
great
curious
question.
That is a really good.
because it clearly opened the door to other
I definitely saw them
companies.
shifting their marketing to like back to the football space.
It took them a
and,
while
yeah.
though, and I think
They got the
didn't-
comedian.
There was enough
and-
damage done. I think that most people are like, I'm not.
But
going
even the
back."
whole Cracker Barrel thing, which is not
Yeah.
not as political, but it's the idea of, hey, we're getting rid of the old, and and it's like, no, that there's something with
Yeah.
tradition that is important. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Well-
all goes back to
Well, and
tradition.
even sadly with the Cracker Barrel, for me, it's like if that was one of the options on the list, I'm skipping it.
Yeah.
because that CEO still works there.
I don't think Denny's tastes as good as Cracker Barrel, but hey, at least they're not doing weird, warped, trying to get rid
Yeah.
of this and that. And so I do think that as Christians, yes, we call ourselves the majority, but I think sometimes we just sit back and say, well, that's just the way the world is, because we have let the world get that way.
Yeah. I think that, again, it goes back to you can stand on truth, but you can also do it very gracefully, where you're not tearing somebody down and making you make them feel like, oh, you think you're better than me because you didn't watch the halftime show or something like that.
Yeah.
But I do agree with all of what you guys are saying, is like, we are supporting them whenever you buy something or when you give them your time and energy. In a way, you are supporting what they are doing and what's going on.
Yeah. And I the last thing I'll say on that is I don't know anything about Bad Bunny, and so I'm not going to sit here and throw stones in glass houses. The only thing I know about him is what he has spoken on sexuality. And you're like, well, why do Christians care so much about sexuality? We're not the ones bringing that conversation to the table. The world is bringing that. It all comes
What about
back to sex.
the lyrics to his songs? Do you know any of the lyrics?
Haven't read them. Don't plan on it. Don't plan on listening to them.
I think a lot of them are in Spanish.
The world that we live in, it always comes back to the conversation of sex. How are they warping your child's mind? It all comes back to the topic of sex. And it's no coincidence that if you look at his Wikipedia page, the number one topic he's quoted on more than anything is sexuality.
Yeah, there's a rumor going on that Roger Goodell is listening to this podcast.
I'm sure.
And he wants to know, who would you guys pick? The last question for this pod is, who would you want to perform at the
I'll
Super
let
Bowl
Jordan
halftime?
answer first.
I've got
my answer. You want to know my answer is?
Yeah.
Nobody. Have the analysts there and talk about the football game and say, hey, this is what happened.
Like
during
the
first
halftime
half.
report.
Like any other halftime report ever. I don't need to see a concert in the middle of the Super Bowl. If I want to go to a concert, I'll go to a concert. That's my response.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comment Roger.
I'm with Roger, I think.
Okay, so you guys
I
are
don't
both.
need a halftime show.
You guys,
if I had to pick a halftime show,
see,
like anyone.
And it causes me to ask them, do they know who their demographic is?
Yeah.
That actually cares about a football game.
I mean, George Strait's a good answer. I'm not a huge George Strait fan, but at least George
goodness.
Strait's lyrics.
People would be singing along.
George Strait sings about middle America.
Yeah.
I, as a Midwestern middle class dude from Missouri, I can relate to the lyrics of George Strait.
Yeah.
So that's a good answer.
I think, you almost should just do like a greatest hits time. But if I had to choose one art, I'd want somebody country. See, I'm against you guys. You guys saying, hey, have the analysts sit down and talk. I'm about tradition. I think it's cool to have a Super Bowl halftime show, even though I don't watch it most of the time.
I was about to say, you already said you don't watch
it. I don't. But it's just the whole concept of it. But if I can't choose a country artist, because I guess apparently not everybody likes country.
Well, country's not country anymore. So
I've already kind of mentioned him, and it's because he is Christian, but he gets a lot of the hip hop department, and so he's pulling those a lot in. Is Forrest Frank? He is doing work right now where it is not just Christian. He is pulling in a lot of people.
Yeah, I have no clue.
You guys know who Forrest Frank is?
See, now I feel like a hypocrite. I'm like, don't pick Bad Bunny. No one knows who he is. I don't know who Forrest Frank is.
But he's somebody that not just Christians like, and so it is his music and his style is something that even non-Christians listen to and everything. So, but it's very wholesome. It's good stuff. Yeah, you'd like it. You need to go listen to Forrest Frank.
Yeah, you're asking the wrong guy. I guess all mine would be Washed Up or Dead.
I just like football. I just like football.
Just play
watch
football.
You know?
Okay.
Youth groups or whoever, when you meet, have a Bible study with your child in the halftime show, because I promise you, whatever Bible study you choose is going to be better than what you watch on TV. Guaranteed.
I don't think we ever had a youth group Super Bowl watch party. Did you and I?
Yeah, I thought we did one year, but I could be wrong. Maybe it was before us, but I do remember, growing up, that was just the normal thing, is all the youth groups get together for the Super Bowl. And now it's okay, well, as a youth pastor, it's now I got to write a letter to all the parents explaining what they,
I honestly think we didn't have it because the Chiefs were always playing in it, and I wanted to be able to focus on the game.
That might be true.
And also, if the Chiefs were not doing good, I didn't want the youth students to see me in that. See me. No, I wouldn't say that. I didn't want to be, depressed.
The other side.
I didn't want to be depressed around them.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so hopefully that answers the question. And again, I can't say it enough. I don't know. I don't want to sit here and be like, this is my incriminating evidence against Bad Bunny. Don't know who the guy is. I found out of his existence recently, but I can soundly say he's not representative of Judeo-Christian values. I think I can say that. So
yeah. Well, good topic. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
All right, that was
fun.
fun.
To chew on there.
Yeah. Join us on Sunday for week 2 of Parables, and it's gonna be a good time.
And you can't be a Samaritan to everyone, but you can be a Samaritan to one.
Let's be good.
There you go.
That's good.
Yep.
We're talking about the parable of sower this week, so tune in. It's gonna be a good one.